Hey friends, it's Mike. It's Sunday. It's June 30th, 2019, and around 10 p.m. here on the East Coast. Let me say first that I had no intentions of doing this video. The only reason why I'm doing it is because I received a number of PMs and emails from folks who follow the Paul is Dead conspiracy and my research. And they caught a video on Tina's channel that was put together by fellow Paul is Dead researcher and all-around good person, Tani. And Tani's video was around 2 minutes long. I'll have the link down below so you can take a look at it, where he shows Aleister Crowley with purportedly with 6 toes. And of course, the significance of that is the whole discussion that we all have been having with a version of Fall with 6 toes. And so if Crowley has 6 toes and Fall has 6 toes, and in memoirs, Billy is clearly telling us that Crowley is a very significant factor, a very significant aspect of the Beatles, but also to Billy. Because in Memoirs, the second edition, the blue-covered book, it states that, well, Billy tells us that he was tutored by Aleister Crowley up through the age of 10. So Crowley died in 1947, Billy was born in 1937, so there's the 10 years. So when Tani put this together, it appeared to be another piece of the puzzle that was coming together, right? We were told that Crowley and Billy have very strong ties. So there's a blood relationship there. I'm thoroughly convinced of it. I am not convinced that they are necessarily father and son, although it could be. But I am convinced that there is bloodline connections. Nephew, uncle, whatever, but maybe not father and son. But the problem with the video, and I covered this with Tani, by the way, earlier today with some email messages, so he knows where I stand on this thing. So I'm not trying to broadside him in any way because he does great work. He's a real critical thinker. When I watched the video initially on my phone, because I'm using the small screen, I thought, okay, this has promise. And I wrote Tani back and I said to him, this is good stuff. But then when I came home and I played the video on my large screen and I took a look, the image is grainy. It's not very clear, and I was not convinced that it was showing 6 toes. That, coupled with another researcher, Constance, who is a member of the Memoirs study group, she had watched the video also, along with many other people who follow the Paul is Dead research. She posted images of Crowley which were clearer, where it showed 5 toes. I see 5 toes in the pictures or the images that Constance posted on the Memoirs study group page. So my answer to the questions that have been asked me about Tani's video is that I believe the video is not evidence enough to definitively say that Crowley had 6 toes. In fact, I'll just say that I think the video was inconclusive. That's my personal position on it. Somebody else, of course, might disagree with me, and that's okay. Agree to disagree, but because I'm being asked, I'm giving my answer. I found it inconclusive. The other problem that I found with the video, and I don't want to say a problem, but the other issue, I should say, is that the video draws a conclusion that the 6-toe version of Fall is Billy, and I don't lean that way. I believe the 6-toe version of Fall is most likely another person playing the character of Paul McCartney, but it's not Billy. It could be Street Paul, as an example, or it could be any one of the other lookalikes or doubles that were in play across the timeline. All right. I believe Billy has 5 toes, and he has 5 toes with the hallux extensus, the big toe cocked upward. This is the foot that we see walking across Abbey Road, and I've shown many images where we could see that Billy has 5 toes and he has that cocked big toe. Now, some people could argue, and it's a legitimate argument, that perhaps Billy had surgery and he had the sixth toe removed, and so now he has five toes. I guess it could be. The problem, again, is that Billy's toes are hammered. In other words, they're kind of clawed this way. Not just the hallux extensus going up, but the rest of his toes are kind of bent. And when you take a look at the six toe version of Fall, you don't see that. His toes are pretty straight. Okay. Now, going back to Tani's video, one of the things that I've noticed, because I've been looking at a lot of feet lately, because of this whole five toe, six toe thing, is that let's just pretend here that my hand is somebody's foot. Okay. So here is the pinky toe. Now, for a lot of people, the pinky toe itself going into the side of the foot, right, is straight, like my hand, right? But for other people, it's not like that. For other people, there is kind of it's rounded over here. And I see this where I live because down south, a lot of people wear sandals and flip-flops, right? So why is it rounded like this? Well, it could just simply be the bone structure. It's the way the foot is constructed. It could be a bunion, all right? Now, people who have six toes, many times what happens is the sixth toe is not always very well defined. The pinky toe could be, or could look like a nub, all right? So when you look at the image in Tani's video, I was looking to see, is there a nub there? And I have to be honest, I blew the picture up. I tried to to sharpen it some and use a little contrast, and I still was scratching my head. I'm not saying it can't be. I'm just saying that, again, to use the word I used before, inconclusive. All right. So, and I don't think we can make the leap that says even if Crowley has six toes, that he's Billy, because Billy may not be the version of McCartney with six toes. In fact, I'm going to put a picture in this video here toward the end that I found on one of the media outlets. It was the 55 best photos of Paul McCartney, something to that effect. And it was a great picture in that collection where Billy is sitting with Linda and he's barefoot and he has five toes. It's very clear he has five toes. Now, what we do have to do, and I'll do this, is I have to put side by side the picture of him on the porch with Linda, with Fall on the porch with Linda, I shouldn't say Billy, with six toes, and then lay up this other image I found with him with Linda with five toes. And what we need to do is take a look at the face and see if the faces look identical or if they just look similar. Because if they just look similar, that would lend itself to say that we have a double, right? Maybe perhaps the six-toe version is the double and the five-toe version is Billy. All right. I know this gets really convoluted, but that's what this conspiracy is about. Now, there is upside and downside to the video being up on YouTube. Let's cover the upside first. The upside is that there are a lot of people that were in the Paul is Dead community and doing research that completely poo-pooed the whole Aleister Crowley magic, mysticism piece of this equation. They just didn't want to talk about it. They didn't consider it. Even when it was brought to their attention, they just wanted to shove it to the side. They didn't want to talk about it. The fact that Tani did the video and people are having a positive reaction to it says to me that more and more people now are coming on board and understanding the role that Crowley plays, not just with the Beatles, not just with Billy, but with everything that goes on within the Pyramid of Power. Because as I've mentioned in other videos, and this is spelled out again in memoirs, that the 13 degrees of the Illuminati, they subscribe to Crowley's thelema. They subscribe to his philosophy and his spirituality. So the upside is that people are becoming more aware of the impact and the role, which is very, very, a very powerful role that Crowley played and still plays in the whole philosophy of the people that run the reality. So this is good. So people that who were into the Paul is Dead research, who initially rejected the whole Aleister Crowley piece of this thing, are now coming on board. Or I should say more and more people are coming on board. This is a good thing. The downside is that if Crowley doesn't have 6 toes, there are going to be a lot of people that are just going to run with the video and saying that Aleister Crowley has 6 toes and Fall has 6 toes, and therefore they are definitely related, or that they're definitely father and son. And anybody who does conspiracy research or alternative research knows that this happens a lot, where people will watch a video and they will take that information and they will just run off with it. And that concerns me a little bit, because I believe a lot more research has got to be done, a lot more inspection and analysis into this piece of it, the anatomy of the feet, the relationship Billy actually has with Crowley. Is it really father and son? Is it just bloodline, uncle, nephew, that type of thing? A lot more work has got to be done there. Certainly there are clues, strong clues. Memoirs gives us very, very strong clues of a very tight relationship between Billy and Crowley. In fact, in Memoirs, Billy refers to Crowley as Father Crowley. Now, some people will look at that and say, well, that's because in Memoirs, Billy says that Crowley is the main protagonist of modern day Satanism, right? That he's the main guy for modern day Satanism, Luciferianism, and so he's the head priest, if you will, right? So if you're in the Roman Catholic Church, you would refer to a priest as father, right? And so some will argue that that's what Billy's doing. He's referring to Crowley in a priest capacity and calling him Father Crowley. On the other hand, Billy is well known for layering his wording and his masterful speaking, and so he could be dropping another clue, disguising it as a reference to a priest figure, Father Crowley, or he's actually giving us a wink and a nod and saying, that's my father. All right. But again, a lot more work has got to be done in this area. I know folks that are looking at the genealogy and the ancestry, and they're trying to backtrack it. Folks have gotten back to me and they said it's difficult. It's very difficult. All right. So now the other thing is, the other upside to it, I should say, it really runs parallel with becoming more aware of Crowley's role in all of this, is that it's the occult, right? Crowley is the occult. He is magic. He is mysticism. Now, when I had Richard Balducci on the show, and Richard is an expert in the occult, he's been studying it for many, many, many years. Many people wrote me the comments. The response to the show from Richard was overwhelmingly positive. People were blown away. And in fact, Richard and I will be doing another show. But there is this minority of people, some of them are researchers, which is very disappointing, who will vilify Richard and say that he's not an expert in this, and this is all nonsense and all of that. It's very unfortunate, because one of the things that I have learned doing this work, and just not just the McCartney stuff, but all of the conspiracy work, I've been doing my channel for 5 years. I have something like 240 something interviews, is that there are people that are a lot smarter than you, and there are people a lot smarter than me. Because if there weren't people smarter than me, then I would interview myself. I wouldn't have guests come on the show. So it's very unfortunate when other researchers take that position where they just want to knock the rungs out of the ladder, and they're doing it, in my view, because it's almost resentment. Right? They're resentful of the fact that Richard's coming on and putting this information out there, and maybe it's a case of where they feel like that type of show, that type of discussion, that type of information is stealing their thunder. Okay. Now, I'm not talking about any particular person, okay, because I'm serious when I tell you the number of personal messages, especially emails that come in. And there's a lot of people out there that call themselves researchers and investigators, okay? It's not just like the 4 or 5 people that are the 4 or 5 people that we kind of know, okay, me being one of them. There are a lot of people out there. They may not be as well known, but they're entrenched in trying to figure things out. But they say things sometimes that, like I said, I look at it and think to myself, I don't know. You've got to spend more time understanding this stuff. You have to understand that the occult plays a major role in how our reality operates. It's all occulted. As I've mentioned many times before on shows, and in a show I did with Ole Damergaard going back a number of years ago, anything worth knowing is a lie. And it's true, okay? Which means things are hidden. And occulted means hidden. So I want to read something to you, okay? To prove the point about the whole bit about astrology being very, very important. And, and going hand in hand with that is occulted knowledge, hidden knowledge. Because the truly understanding astrology, being an expert in astrology, is a science. Astrology is not just a horoscope in a newspaper. They have dumbed down the public to believe that, right? That's their mindset. Oh, a horoscope is astrology, and it's the furthest thing from the truth, right? It's a very deep science, and there are people who are very, very well versed. They're experts in it. Richard being one of them. So Richard is, when he presents his information to us, he's giving us, he's giving us a gift of knowledge. He's sharing it. He doesn't have to do that. You see what I'm saying? So anyway, to prove the point, remember this cover? January 1981 Playboy. On the cover, Barbara Bach, the future wife of Ringo Starr. She married Ringo in April of 1981. This came out in January of 1981. This is the issue of Playboy that contained the famous John Lennon interview. Okay? Now, if you think that this issue containing Lennon's interview and the future wife of Ringo Starr being on the cover is coincidence, I would say perhaps not. Okay? Everything is tied together. You have to connect the dots. All right? So why is this a point of discussion, Mike? Well, in the interview, there was the whole setup to the interview. There's this little backstory that Playboy would do with their interviews to give you a backdrop as to how the interview came about. And the person doing the interview is a guy by the name of David Sheff. So I'm going to read something to you. And yes, I have to put my readers on because I'm at that age. And as I'm reading it, I'm sure that you'll understand completely why it is I'm relaying this to you. So David tells us, there was an excellent chance this interview would never take place. When my contacts with the Lennon-Ono organization began, one of Ono's assistants called me asking seriously, "What's your sign?" The interview apparently depended on Yoko's interpretation of my horoscope, just as many of Lennon's business decisions are reportedly guided by the stars. I could imagine explaining to my Playboy editor, "Sorry, but my moon is in Scorpio. The interview is off." It was clearly out of my hands. I supplied the info. December 23rd, 3 p.m., Boston. Thank my lucky stars, the call came in and the interview was tentatively on. And I soon found myself in New York, passing through the ominous gates and numerous security checkpoints at Lennon's headquarters, the famed Dakota apartment building on Central Park West, where the couple dwells and where Yoko Ono holds court, beginning at 8 o'clock every morning. Ono is one of the most misunderstood women in the public eye. Her mysterious image is based on some accurate and some warped accounts of her philosophies and her art statements, and on the fact that she never smiles. It is also based, perhaps unfairly, and it's interesting he used the word perhaps, on resentment of her as the sorceress Svengali, who controls the very existence of John Lennon. Now, this is very interesting because in Memoirs, in the revised edition, the Blue Book, Billy tells us very clearly that Yoko is John's handler. Very specifically. He doesn't beat around the bush. That's what he tells us. Yoko was John's handler. That image has remained through the years since she and John met, primarily because she hasn't chosen to correct it, nor has she chosen to smile. So as I removed my shoes before treading on her fragile carpet, those were the instructions. I wondered what the next test might be. Between interruptions from her two male assistants busy screening the constant flow of phone calls, Yoko gave me the once-over. She finally explained that the stars had indeed said it was right. Very right, in fact. Who was I to argue? So the next day, I found myself sitting across a couple of cups of cappuccino from John Lennon. Okay, so you can see Yoko using astrology to determine when's a good time and when is a not so good time to conduct business, when to do interviews. We also saw this with Ronald Reagan. I don't know if a lot of you remember this. You can look it up. I'm sure it's still on the internet. But Nancy Reagan had employed an astrologer to enable the Reagans to decide when to do things and when not to do things. When were the planets aligned so that there would be success, and when was it when the planets weren't positioned correctly, or the constellations, where things might go awry. Okay, so I just want to put this out there to try to get the point across to some of the naysayers and the people that just continue to want to think in a linear way. And this reality is not about thinking linear. This reality is very dynamic, and there are many variables and pieces to the puzzle that make it work. And there is a hidden hand, and there is a pyramid of power, and we have controllers, and their world is not our world. And the only way that we're going to understand this reality, truly understand it, not the matrix that they gave us, that's an illusion, that's a false reality, is to understand how it is that they operate. And once we understand that, how they operate, we get a lot smarter about the decisions that we make in this reality. Okay, so that's it, folks. Again, Tani, if you're watching this, and I'm sure you are, please do not take offense. It's just that I was receiving a lot of emails and PMs on this, and I thought that I should explain, or at least present my position on the video. Okay? All right, everybody, have a great evening, and we will talk soon.